What's going on, everybody? My name is Jason. I work at All Out Bikes in Four Oaks, North Carolina, and today we are working on this 1992 Paramount Series 50. This is a really cool bike, and the way we got this is the customer loves Paramount bikes. So he's got several of these. He ended up buying this bike from a individual. Originally, when this customer bought this bike, it had a front suspension fork on here, and it actually had this one right here. This is an old RockShox Mag 21. This is actually a pretty cool fork. This one is an air fork from like 92, and the customer, he didn't want this fork on there, so he started looking online trying to find a original fork for this, and he did find it. He was so excited. The fork was like $30, and shipping was about $20. He basically spent a little less than $50 on this, and he was so excited. He ordered it. It came in, and unfortunately, he was so excited about actually finding the fork that he didn't think about the steer tube length. And this fork is actually for a bike that is 1 or 2 sizes smaller than this, so he's not able to install the fork properly because the headset doesn't fit all the way. So he was very disappointed, and I understand, because finding a fork that matches this paint scheme is near about impossible. So the customer ended up wanting these heads, this handlebar that's on here, and the stem. So he had a quilled adapter going from 1 1/8 threaded to a 1 1/8 threadless. So I couldn't really help the customer out with this, because you can take this fork to a frame builder and they could replace the steer tube on this. However, from my experience, that always ends up damaging the paint from the welding process. The heat gets to the paint and it messes it up. So if he were to have this replaced, he's going to have it repainted, and you cannot copy this. I mean, that's just not going to happen. So we made a suggestion to the customer, and I actually had one of these forks in stock. It's a brand new fork, and it looks just like this original fork as far as the style goes. And we're going to install this because it's black, but it's going to match, because it's okay if the fork is a different color. That actually happens all the time, where the manufacturers will have a aftermarket fork put on there. And this fork was not made by Paramount. I'm pretty sure that they actually had this made by another company and it was just painted in the same factory as the frame. So we're going to install this fork. Now this one is a threadless steer tube. So what we're going to do is we're going to utilize this threadless stem that he's got on there, and we're just going to put some spacers on there. So we're making it where it's a lot more comfortable. He's just going to be cruising around on this bike, so that should not hurt anything. And I think that this is going to turn out really good. So let's go ahead and start working on this. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to just take the stem off. I'm pretty sure that this originally came with some Shimano DX rapid fire, or excuse me, no, it wouldn't have been rapid fire. It would have been Shimano DX STI shifters. So it would have been a dual thumb design back then. This customer really loves thumb shifters. Okay, he's kind of old school, and there is actually no problems with thumb shifters. He's going with the friction shifters. Personally, I would have gone with the indexed thumb shifters. Thumb shifters are really just very simple. Okay, and there's really not a lot to go wrong with thumb shifters, and also the position of them is actually pretty cool. So I've got several bikes with thumb shifters on there, and I'm perfectly happy with them. I'm not going to change the shifting just because it's a thumb shifter. All right, let's take this thing out. And that's not going to fit. Wow, that is a not the best design. That goes way on down in there. All right, I don't have the leverage. Let's find a wrench here. There we go. So I've got a nice wrench here. We can use the adjustable wrench here, or we can just put the little hole there onto it. I'm just going to cheap out and do it like that. So see that top nut just came right off. So by doing this, we're actually simplifying this. We're getting rid of all the extra bits. Okay. It's a shame that's a sealed bearing headset. That would have been kind of cool. But what can you do? These early Paramount forks also didn't have safety tabs on there, so I don't know if you noticed, I flipped this quick release and the wheel came right off. I actually like that. It makes changing wheels, flats and such so much easier. So it's on there. We're just gonna flip it and it comes right off. The new fork, you can thank lawyers for this. The new fork is going to have safety tabs on there, and it's not going to come off quite that easily. Now, some people have actually gotten some files and filed them off. It's a safety thing, and I'm okay with just a couple of seconds of undoing a quick release for that little bit of extra safety. So we're taking the brakes off. We don't need to worry about the we don't have to worry about the race that's on here because we're using a different headset. The first thing that we need to do is we need to knock these cups out of this frame. So I have a special tool here, and the way this works is we just kind of slide this in. You want to slide it in kind of backwards and then just kind of hammer. So what happens is whenever you slide it in, these little prongs here kind of spread out and snap into place, and it's able to push the cup out. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to slide it in kind of upside down, and then we're going to pull it in, and then it'll snap just like that. Okay, and then I hold the cup here because it's going to want to shoot into the air, and I don't want it to chip the frame. The sealed bearing headsets are actually not very good for these old frames, unless if you face the frame before putting them in. I have a nice FSA headset here. It's not a sealed bearing, but it's a very good headset. Okay. we're going to want to grease the frame. It looks clean in there. I don't see any dirt. It's kind of dry. So it looks like the customer had already cleaned up the head tube there whenever he installed the headset. Okay, so now I like to install 1 cup at a time, because if you install 2 cups at a time, if one starts to go crooked, they both go crooked. So I'm going to use my trusty Park Tool headset press. So let's go ahead and press this top one in. And I'm going to try to make sure that this press is centered, and then we're going to press it in. And you don't want to do it too super tight, just snug. You can actually feel it make contact with the frame, and that's as far as you need to go. Now this one has FSA right here on the front, and we're going to make sure that it's facing the front. It's not that big of a deal. It could be facing to the side, it could be facing to the back, it could be facing whichever way you want. But I think it looks a lot more professional when it's facing forward. Okay. We gotta let this thing engage. Okay, there we go. Make sure the press is centered. We're making sure that the FSA is facing forward. And then we're going to press it. I felt it make contact. Just give it a little extra oomph. And your cups are installed. Okay, so now with the fork, I need to install a lower brace from the new headset. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grease the area that the race is going to be pressed onto. This does multiple things. It helps allow it to go on easier. It also prevents corrosion. That's important because we're in North Carolina, and where we're at, it's very humid, and I like to make sure my stuff lasts. I've got my headset race installer doohickey. Oh, I don't like that. Let's start to use this one right here. Now, the tool that I'm using is actually a crown race setting tool, so it's a CRS-1. Okay, so now I'm going to slide this into place, and we're going to hit it with a hammer. I don't know if you heard, but when that tone changes, that lets you know that the race is set. And this is a loose ball bearing headset, so I didn't need to face the crown. With sealed bearing headsets, I do like to put a facing tool onto the crown surface and make sure that that is flush. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making sure that I'm not seeing any daylight through the bottom there, and that's looking good. So we're going to put the seal in place, and then I'm going to be using some really good high quality Red Devil grease for the bearings, headset bearings. I like to put it inside of the bearings here, inside the back of the bearings. There's a lot of space for the grease to go to. So we're going to do that. Make sure you put the bearings on the proper way. So with the race, it's going to be going into the bearings, and if you look at the bearings on here, you'll actually see the cage is kind of in the way of the race there. So that tells you that that's upside down if you do that. So on the back side, you see more bearing, and it fits perfectly onto the race. So we're going to put some grease into the cup. So now we're going to put a generous amount of grease in the top here. And then we're going to do the same thing to the top bearing here. So let's get that grease put in the bearings here. You can never use too much grease whenever it comes to bearings. Well, that's not true. If you're racing, you want to actually use less grease, just enough to get you through the race, because the grease does slow you down a little bit. It makes the bearings last longer. So I mean, actually for BMX racing and such, I mean, we've put oil in the bearings to try to make sure that the bearings spin just super fast. But it doesn't last as long. That's why the manufacturers don't use oil and they use grease. So we're going to put that in place. We're going to put our FSA top cap. It's got 2 FSAs, so I'm going to go on the side. I need to install this star nut, and I have a tool for that. They've come out with a better tool for it, and I just haven't gotten it yet, but it works quite well. So this is a star nut installation tool. It works very well. The only bad thing is the newer ones have a sleeve that's going over the steer tube as a guide. This is the older one that doesn't have the guide. You don't have to have the guide. I like to put a little bit of grease on the inside, again, to help with the corrosion. All right, so we're going to put it on the top there, and we're going to drive it in. Okay, so it's going crooked right there, so I'm going to put gentle pressure as I'm driving it in, and it starts to straighten out like that. So these old ones, as you're driving it in, you have to kind of guide it, and I'm used to this. Straight as can be. Okay, so let's get this slid in there. And come on, there you go. So we got a lot of steer tube sticking out of there. I'm going to wipe any excess grease that might have gotten on there. And let's see, I've got some nice carbon fiber spacers that we're going to be using with this, because why not? And then, let's see, do I need some more headset spacers? I do believe I do. Yeah, I need one more spacer. So I'm going to see if I can find one. I am going to just screw this top cap in there so that whenever I let this go, it doesn't fall out. Well, I don't have enough carbon fiber spacers for this, and that's okay because they didn't have carbon fiber spacers back then. I was just, since we were going for this whole retro mod thing, I figured, what the hey, I had a bunch of these, but apparently I didn't have enough. All right, let's start adding some of these spacers on here. I wish I had some longer ones. We have enough. Might have one too much. Okay. I am going to add one more. I'm just going to add a thinner one. And I know a lot of people are kind of cringing right now, you know, having the nice Paramount like this. But this is cool. There's nothing wrong with this. This customer, this is the way he wants it. And it is his bike. And we're going to do exactly what he wants. And actually, I'm in the position that he's in. To let you know, he's going to be trying to find another fork for this. He's really wanting the original fork on here, but in the meantime, he's not able to ride this thing. And this is going to turn out really cool. But he's going to be trying to find the proper fork for this, and I don't blame him. I would be too, but he might find one next week. He might not be able to find one for 30 years. Okay, let's try to make sure this FSA is centered. Make sure the FSA cap is centered. So what we're going to be doing here is with the stem pinch bolts loose, we're going to be tightening this top one, and you don't want to tighten this very tight, okay? What we're doing is we're sandwiching the bearings together, and if you tighten it too much, what happens is the bearings are going to pit. It's gonna feel kind of rough. So you only want to tighten it just enough where you can actually feel it make contact, and then a little bit further. Let's grease these stem bolts because they never grease these stem bolts. That's one. I turned the stem a little bit and it loosened up the bearings. So I tightened that top cap again. Now, torque specs are very important. You do not want to go over 6 Newton meters with this, at least. Oh wow, it says 8 Newton meters. From my experience with these smaller bolts, you don't want to go over 6, but okay, it says 8 Newton meters max. So you can tighten it. It should be safe to tighten it up to, well, 5 should be fine, but since this says 8 Newton meters max, I'm going to tighten it to 7. I'm not going to go quite all the way, but I'm just making sure that that's tight in place. I'm not going to check the torque spec yet because the handlebars might be a little crooked. At this point, I do like to give it a little bit of a spin. So you see the headset stopping there. Let's give it a spin for a minute. And once those bearings start to kind of wear in a little bit and the grease starts kind of going in all the little crevices, it tends to turn a little bit more like that. So this feels really good. And do we have any play? I think we've got a little bit of play. It's fine. We'll check it whenever we could get it put together. Okay, let's put the front wheel on and see what it looks like. Okay, let's get this put in. Okay. Okay. Let's get those brakes put on. I always like to put a little bit of grease on the posts there. Okay. We're going to put this brake in the... There's several holes for the spring to go into. I'm just going in the middle. Not too tight, not too loose. Okay. So we're going to put the bolts in place. We're going to tighten those. You do not want to over tighten these bolts because if you over tighten the bolts, it'll mushroom out the boss. And the boss is what that little post that's coming out of the fork. And if it flares out, then your brakes are not going to work properly. Okay. Now, I did forget, this is an old cantilever style bike, so I need to put a cable stop right here. What I have to do, there is a little tab. I don't know if you can see it. It's just right here. What I've got to do is I've got to file that little tab off so it'll actually go onto this threadless stem. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we'll move this one down all the way to the bottom. Now that this tab is off, let's take this back off and see if we can do this right. So this is just a resto mod because of the fact that we're not able to find the original stuff. Okay, let's put this on, put this back on. See, might be able to take this small spacer out. Nice. You want to try to get as much steer tube in the stem as possible, because whenever you clamp it down, it really does need to have as much steer tube as possible to grab onto. Headset turns easily. It will loosen up. Okay. So now we have our cable stop. Apparently we're missing a threaded barrel for this die comp. I'll be back in a second. I'm going to go find one. Okay, now that we've got the fork installed, we're going to go ahead and install this front brake. So, let's see. Now I've got a nice lined stainless steel cable that's going to work great for this. We're going to cut the end of the cable that we're not using. Okay, now I'm going to give this a little bit of a curve, and we're going to cut it right there, but we need to be careful. We need to pull the cable out all the way out of the housing so we don't accidentally cut the cable. Okay, so we're going to make sure that the housing is fully open. Just see a little obstruction here, so I'm going to cut it. There we go. Okay. We're going to slide the cable in. Okay. And then we're going to lubricate the cable. Now that we've got the cable housing adjusted properly, we want to actually put one of these cable housing ferrules on this. It kind of finishes the look, makes it look a little bit better. Also helps keep the housing together in certain applications. So we're gonna get this cable put through the adjustment barrel here. Okay, there we are, nice and clean. Now we're going to be putting one of these together. For bikes from the 80s and early 90s, they used some of these Shimano link wires, which was a little unusual, and they're actually a little difficult, just a little difficult to adjust properly. Now they make tools for them. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting this cable through the two pieces of metal here, the round discs, and we're going to get it right about there, and it kind of Y's out like this. And we're going to hook one end in to the brake here, and then on the other brake we're going to put the cable through. Now, this is where the fun begins, because every time you mess with the cable, it messes with the middle here. Alright, so this is a little unusual. There's this little plastic gauge here, and you actually put it on, there's a little slot here that you want to put the cable near the brake there. We're going to put it there. The link wire is going to go in the middle. Let me see. It's been a while since I've done one. Come on, get in there. Okay. And then we're going to do that. Okay. So this kind of centers the brake. And so you can actually tighten it to where you want it, which is going to be maybe somewhere around there. But the customer was wanting some extra soft brake pads for this. So that's what we're going to be doing. I've got some very soft brake pads. Lots of companies do these. This one is the Ashima, Originate brake pads here. So these are a good soft brake pad, and we're wanting the front to be there, and so these are directional. You want to make sure that you get that right. So we're going to remove this old Shimano brake pad, which is kind of hard and really affects the braking power. And we're going to put the left pad onto the left side. And this brake pad is kind of offset, so you normally tow these old cantilever brake pads. This is not going to require much towing. I'm going to try to go flat first to try to utilize the braking power as much as possible. However, if it makes a lot of noise, if it squeals, we're going to have to tow it. Let's remove this other brake pad. So you need to put a 5mm Allen key into the front of the brakes here, and that helps you hold the brake steady as you're loosening it up. We're going to put the new brake pad in there. Okay. Okay. So now let's tighten this up. We're going to make sure that's loose, and then we're going to try to get it secured. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we need to adjust the spring tension here. but the brake is actually pretty centered, and the brake lever is probably in a pretty good position. The wheel is a little offset, so the wheel is not perfectly straight in the fork, so these brakes are not lining up perfectly. But let's just eyeball it here. Okay. Try to move this one up a little bit. Trying to make everything kind of even. Okay. Let's go ahead and snug everything in place. Okay, so we're going to adjust the brake balance here. So we're going to keep on adjusting the spring on this side until they both hit in the middle. I'm going to tighten this cable up a little bit up here because I do want it a little bit tighter. So, not rubbing, and that is good and tight. Let's go ahead and trim this cable down to about where that adjustment screw is. We're going to put a cap on it. And that's that. We're going to tuck it in behind the brake so it's that nice clean look. Looking good and super grippy. Okay, so let's run this rear brake through. I'm going to get one of these little sleeves to put it in this rear brake area. It helps add a little bit of smoothness to it. There we go. We're going to run it through this sleeve I just put there. Nice and smooth. And we're going to put a drop of Triflow in here to can make it nice and smooth. We're going to slide this cable through the way it came out. Okay. We're going to be hooking this up. Put that where it's supposed to be. That lines up. And then we're going to do that. And then you simply okay. Let's trim that. Put a cable tip on it, and then we can move to the gears. tuck it in. Those brakes work great. Okay, so with friction cable, you don't have to worry about the whole indexing thing. You just get the cable kind of tight, and then that's pretty much it. Friction is one of the simplest setups you can do. Let's get some more of this nice Triflow. Some more Triflow. Now it really doesn't need it, but I like these sleeves because it makes things a little bit smoother. Cable. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to figure out the length of this housing, and you want it to have a bit of a loop going on here. So it's better to be a little long than a little too short. And we can't forget the Triflow. Stretched out a lot. Okay. Let's get a chain, put it on. I'm going to go ahead and put it to the top there to let the cable stretch. New housing here. Let's get this front derailleur hooked up. We want to go around this little pulley right here. You want to make sure that this spins freely. This was stuck, and we so you want to wrap the cable around this pulley. Now make sure that this pulley is moving freely. This one was stuck, and I had to take it apart and grease it. So there's a bushing in there that you've got to pull out, and then just put some plastic safe grease on there. I use the Park Tool green grease. The Polylube works wonderfully. You want to make sure that you actually run the cable over. There's a little aluminum tab right here. You want to make sure that you actually go over the tab straight across here. We're going to tighten this a little bit. We're going to kind of stretch it out a little bit, and look at how loose that cable is. So we're going to go ahead and tighten it again at this point. And I can go ahead and tighten this down firmly. Then we're going to cut the cable. You want to cut it about 1.5 inches past the clamp. That way it gives you something to grab onto. Let's put a cap on it. We're going to crimp the cable tip on there, and then just kind of bend the cable up out of the way. And if you'll notice, whenever you're shifting this, it doesn't get in the way of your legs or anything else. You want to shift the cables down to the smallest gear in the back and the smallest gear in the front. Make sure that you run the chain through the derailleur properly. So there's a guard right here. Chain goes behind that guard, and then there's another piece of metal sticking out down here. We actually want to go above that one, and even us professionals are not perfect. So let's try that again. We want to go through the top part there. We're going to run the chain over that and under this upper pulley, because you can actually see a little guard right there. And we're going to come out the back over the top of the gears there. We're going to go through the front derailleur onto the last gear. And then you want to make sure that you pull this enough that the chain is not touching the bottom pulley here or the chain. We can make this a little bit shorter than it is right now, but I like to leave a little bit of room so that if you were to have an issue on the trail, you can trim 2 links out, like if you have one that's damaged. I like to be able to shorten the chain a little bit without worrying about ripping my derailleur off. We're going to look at the master links to make sure that they're not directional. These are not. And these are a 2-piece chain design, so you actually, or 2-piece master link, you actually put one on the back side, and then on the other end of the chain you put it on the front side, and you actually put them together, and it just kind of, the pressure actually keeps it, the pressure of the spring actually keeps it together. Notice that the chain is not grinding against the derailleur there. This chain is not sagging, so this is adequate. Now we could have cut 2 more lengths out of this chain and it would have been fine. If you want to make sure that this chain is not too short, you can simply shift this to the biggest gear in the front and then carefully shift to the biggest ring in the back and make sure that this arm isn't going straight out, because then that chain is definitely going to be too short. Now this is good to check this on a hardtail. You can also do it on the full suspension. What you do is you do the exact same thing, but then what you need to do is you need to let the air out of the rear shock, or you need to unbolt the shock and then just carefully move the suspension up to the maximum of what it's supposed to be, while keeping an eye on the derailleur to make sure that the derailleur isn't going to get damaged. So, alright, let's adjust the derailleur here. And then we're about done. Alright, so this video is an experiment. I've had people ask for me not to do the time lapses, so this is what I go through with some editing to really kind of cut it down, but this video is getting incredibly long. Now, if y'all did enjoy the video, please leave me a big thumbs up. Be sure to leave the comments down below as far as what you would like to see, what you liked, what you didn't like. Don't forget to tell your friends. Check out some of the other videos on the corner of the screen. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.